Hey there, happy holidays, and nice to see you. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters, writers, editors, people who are putting stuff out, so you get a little insight into what they're thinking about when they write stuff in the borough of the Bronx. And in our second segment, we do music and arts. We're going to do jazz today, something real special. So right now, she's also very special. Our buddy Katie Honan, who is a reporter for the city and co-host of the FAC NYC podcast. Nice to see you again, Katie.
Thanks for having me on, Gary.
One thing which I really appreciated, I know it was a fundraising effort. I saw a little bio, a little statement from you that came into my email that gave us a little insight. And I'm just going to read from it. I don't want to
Thank you.
embarrass you. It said, I was a native New Yorker and a nosy one. I wanted to know about everything and everyone in this great city. Just before we get into a very specific, important issue, talk to me about your passion for doing what you do, for being a journalist.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. We're a nonprofit and this is our fundraising month.
Yes.
And for me, I'm just a native New Yorker, just as it said, and I love New York City. It's really the only thing that interests me as a beat. I know that that's a very expansive beat, but it's really the only thing that's ever interested me in journalism. And that's kind of what led me to this industry and this path. I went to CUNY's Graduate School of Journalism. And I only ever wanted to cover New York. So I've thankfully, been very fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. Anything going on in the five boroughs is sort of my domain, I like to think. And that's what I love
There it
about
is.
the city. And it always changes, and the people are important to me. So that's what drives me.
What is, to me, extremely significant is the city itself, and I'm not talking about New York City, which we can see behind me, but I'm talking about the city. It's a wonderful publication. They're open to investigative things. You get the features. You get really a real flavor for who we are, and the way the stories are told, I think, are in the vernacular that we all use. I mean, you can really I read it religiously,
Thank
and
you.
you digest it. And so anyway, congratulations on landing where you want to be.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh,
It's hard, but I appreciate the support.
I believe me, I understand it because I'm doing what I want to do also here in the borough of the Bronx. Anyway, you wrote this is such an important story. I'm going to read the headline: Council slams mayor for scapegoating migrants to justify the budget cuts. And I have to tell you, when I heard the mayor talking about this is off the journalism path, this is what I thought of when
Mhm.
I heard him talking about the level of budget cuts that he wanted to do, and he connected it to the migrant problem and said it's because of them. I was like, wow, that in my mind, I was doing the same thing the city council is saying. So, talk to me a little bit about this attitude toward migrants by Mayor Adams and how it relates to the budget and some of the most important personal things to us as New Yorkers.
Yeah, so what the city is facing right now is between June of this past year, when we passed this current fiscal year budget, and November of this year, a $7 billion budget gap. And because of that, there were across the board cuts at every city agency you could think of. Sunday library service at the three branches at some individual libraries, some Department of Sanitation initiatives, some composting initiatives. The Parks Department, I think this might be one of the more significant ones. It cut its job training program that really supplied 60 to 70% of the cleaning at city parks through this workforce, thousands of people who were put through this program and given
Yep,
jobs. And
absolutely.
Mayor Adams has been very vocal and very outspoken about the lack of support, mainly financially, from the federal government as the city has dealt with what's been over 100,000 asylum seekers coming to New York City. And obviously, New York City is a right to shelter city, although a lot of that has been kind of chipped away in recent weeks. But what we're dealing with is this influx of people, right? And the city, New York City, is not getting, to Mayor Adams' opinion, is not getting the financial support from the federal government.
Let me just add to that.
Yeah.
In a lot of people's opinions,
Yes.
the federal government, in particular the White House, his visits to Washington, D.C., Brad Lander was in Washington recently, and they didn't come back with the bacon. And, for a Democratic mayor and a Democratic president, it's interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and the mayor has really squarely blamed these cuts that have been very painful to a lot of people, although at this point, no layoffs and no tax increases, although the mayor
Right.
has sort of threatened it. He's blamed it on the migrants. But what the city council pointed out was there were a lot of factors that went into this. A lot of it is the COVID era funding from the federal government expiring. A lot of it is tax revenue that is not coming in as much as it did before COVID. We've kind of had this domino effect of issues here in New York City, starting with COVID in 2020. And then obviously the asylum seekers, which put a strain on the city's budget. But to the council's defense, and a lot of other budget experts have said it's not the only reason.
Uh, so that's number one, and I'll quote from the testimony of the director of the city's IBO, the Independent Budget Office. IBO estimates a budget surplus this year and the budget deficit for 2025 to be smaller than OMB's estimate. And I did an interview with Council Member Eric Dinowitz recently, and he said, if we're a little more efficient about some of the things we do and really look, at cutting waste or duplication or things like that, maybe we could not have these cuts. And the mayor's, I just felt like, and this is from me, that he was using, that the migrant situation as a cudgel and to get people riled up about it. I didn't think it was very New York mayorish, to put it that way. That was my own read of it. And,
Yeah, and I think
put
he has
commentary up there if you want.
no,
That's
and
fine.
he's been criticized for what is really creating this us versus them thing. If you're upset that maybe your child's public school had some cuts to it, or your summer rising program had some cuts to it, which was one of the realities of the November plans modification,
Right.
You're going to blame the migrants. And even the mayor, he's suffered some low poll numbers recently, and his response has been, yeah, I'm angry too. So I think he ultimately wants the city as a whole, his constituents, to feel a real anger towards the federal government. And I think also what happens is, unfortunately, there might be some resentment growing for people who are, seeking political asylum and not exactly given the best, and they're not given luxury hotels to stay at. At this point, a lot of them are staying in tents, or they're not staying anywhere. So that's sort of the issue. And the mayor has criticized the federal government because he says this shouldn't be a city's problem; it's a federal problem.
Right, and throwing money at it is one thing, but you talked about the decisions that migrants themselves are making. Again, it needs a broader look. It's not the kind of problem like you say, well, the city has a garbage problem or a rat problem. We can, just kind of deal with it by being very specific. These are very complex issues. You can't just put up a space like an Orchard Beach that didn't work and you and do that. Then the other question is, which also came up in my interview with Council Member Dinowitz, is the notion of for-profit
Yeah.
versus non-for-profit providers. And many people are saying the for-profit providers may be easier to get to do some of the work, but they may be more expensive and costing all of us a little more money.
Yeah, and the city council and Comptroller Brad Lander have been very critical of Mayor Adams and his administration's decision to give a lot of money, almost cutting a blank check to these for-profit providers. They were given these contracts under an emergency contracting, so they didn't have the same level of oversight, which Comptroller Brad Lander has recently tried to limit a little bit of that. Obviously, if anyone's been reading the news or watching the news, the mayor and the comptroller have been at odds over the last year or so over many decisions. So I think this kind of was one more chapter in the Brad Lander, Eric Adams feud since they've both taken office. So this is sort of their fighting over that. The mayor has said, if you make it harder for us to do these emergency contracts, all it does is make it harder for us to take care of the asylum seekers.
You can't, and you're a sophisticated reporter, you can't look at that relationship. That's okay. You can't look at that relationship and not think that Mayor Adams is looking down the road and saying, assessing the field of potential competitors for his mayoral election, and not identify Brad Lander. And it doesn't help on the other side that Brad Lander is, trying to rope the mayor in and do some. But that is the job of the controller, like it or
Yeah.
not. Your colleague Gwen Hogan wrote a story about the right to shelter
Mhm.
that no longer exists for thousands of migrants. This also adds to the problem, And that, of course, was a Mayor Adams decision, right?
Yeah, my colleague
In
Win
other
wrote,
words, I'm trying to balance this thing
it's
and say, well, okay, where are we at? And there's just so many elements that don't seem to be logical, you know?
yeah, it's a big, complicated city, and that's what the mayor always says, and he's not wrong.
Not
And
wrong
what my
about that.
colleague Gwynn said today, which he wrote, the day we're recording this, is that although we legally still have a right to shelter mandate, that is sort of being discussed in court. Um, Mayor Adams and his administration is trying to say that this shouldn't apply for this level of emergency.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, you don't have that anymore. And for women and children are getting housed, but for dozens of the people that she's spoken to, they're sleeping in bathrooms, they're sleeping on the floor of some waiting centers, although you legally can't sleep there. They are sleeping outside, even though Mayor Adams and his administration has denied that that's the case.
Well, we know that there's no question about it. You just got to look around the streets. And then, of course, what complicates that is the children in schools. And I know the Department of Education is working as hard as it can to incorporate the children in schools. I think there are seats for them. If you look at the numbers of seats
Mhm.
available in the city schools. But if you have a child who, was in a shelter, let's say in Brooklyn, and now all of a sudden, the family has to relocate for one reason or another, and now they're in the Bronx. What are you going to do? Send them to school in the Bronx, or you're going to make them ride the subway and get to Brooklyn in some form? I mean, it just doesn't add up, and I think what it does is it really complicates the whole scenario. And then the mayor says, well, let's just cut the budget. And I appreciate that you mentioned parks, because I think when you deal with police and fire and even composting and all the other stuff, the parks gets underserved, so to
Yeah, the
speak.
Parks Department, they've been fighting for years, advocates to have 1% of the city's budget. They haven't reached that. And I think a lot of the cuts, the mayor stresses public safety. And I think there's a lot of elements to public safety that go beyond police and fire, right? And one of those is having clean and safe recreation spaces that if they're threatened under budget cuts, then I think the people of
Yep.
New York City will be the first
No,
ones it really affects.
no question about it. And we also understand this mayor was a police detective. So, you know where he's coming from. Anyway, Katie Honan, reporter for the city, co-host of FAC NYC podcast. I don't know what we would do without you. We
Well, I
need you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
We need you to keep rolling up your sleeves and getting it done for the city. Please, folks, check out the city. Uh, if you have a mind to, make a donation, but at minimum, click on it, read it, and understand our beautiful city a little better because of people like Katie Honan.
Thanks so much. Have a great new year.
You too. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and then it's jazz. That's a 4-letter word, Yeah, jazz. We'll be right back.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, mijo.
Gracias. Thank you.
What's wrong, mijo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Man, it's lonely. Like, going through life lonely.
There is the therapeutic aspect of music, just expressing how you feel. I'm going to talk to Howie about his feelings, make it into a song.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. This is really exciting because we've got a couple of greats here with us. Let's say good evening to Clyde Ballard, who is the Flushing Town Hall jazz producer. Nice to see you, Clyde.
Thank you for having me.
And Thank you. Happy holidays to us all.
Yes.
And Lewis Hayes, ladies and gentlemen, I'd say we should get a drum roll for Lewis Hayes. He is a world-renowned drummer, jazz drummer, NEA National Endowment of the Arts Jazz Master. It is just a pleasure to have you on the program, Lewis.
It's great to be here. Wow.
Great. Thank you so much. One of the reasons the outreach went to us, first of all, they're both from the Bronx, so let's go there, which we all appreciate, because we know we've created all the music in the world and everybody else is just sharing our stuff, but that's okay.
Right.
But Clyde, talk to me a little bit about Flushing Town Hall and what it does, and then, of course, the big event that happened just December 15th.
I started working at Flushing Town Hall as a producer in 1998.
Uh-huh.
Joanne Jones, the original creator and founder of Flushing Town Hall. I was always her secret weapon, giving her advice and what groups to hire. And it happened that I had a chance to be hired as a producer. So I started in 1998. And so I've been there going on almost like 24, 25 years now. And I've produced some of the greatest luminaries in jazz music and jazz history.
Explain to me what your passion is. Why have you done this? Now you have musical instruments behind you. I'm going to assume you can play a little bit, but what drove you to do that?
I'm a professional bassist who have played all around the world. White House 4 or 5 times. Tony Bennett, Boys Choir Harlem, Bill Withers, who is my uncle. Bill Withers came to a tour. I took him to a tour of Flushing Town Hall in 2005. I do what I do because it's very easy for me. It's natural. Growing up around my father, his name is Clarence C.B. Ballard. He was synonymous with Atlantic Records. He headed the National Jazz Department, but he was there earlier in the studio. So as a young man, here I am around Roberta Flack, Aretha Franklin, Donny Hathaway. I didn't care.
All of them.
Just give me a cheeseburger and a milkshake. I'll sit in the corner and just watch what's going on. I didn't realize that watching Arif Mardin, Chuck Rainey, Bernard Purdy, all of this stuff happening would be deeply embedded inside of me. That when I decided to be a musician, it was all there.
It was all there. Can I just assume that what happened on December 15th and the artists you brought together was really as good as it? In other words, it's almost like this is what I do and this is why I do it.
The epitome Epicurean jazz. I call it the Super Bowl concert. Having those musicians come together with that high level of virtuosity is very rare. And the concert was exquisite. I think anybody there that experienced it would feel the same.
Well, congratulations. We're going to show a clip of Lewis in just a moment. Lewis, first of all, congratulations on your notice by the National Endowment of the Arts and being recognized as you were as an NEA Jazz Master for your contributions to the world of music. You're older than both me and Clyde. Tell me about when you got started and what motivates you even to this day to keep doing what you do.
Well, I feel like it's really special to find something that you love to do when you at an early age, and everything works out for you. Actually, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And my mother and father started me on this journey. First played the piano, then drums. They were right there in the home, both of them. So this has been something that I have always loved doing.
It's in your blood. Do you were you trained formally on the drums, or was it one of those things because the music was around you? They put the drumsticks in your hand, they showed you how to do it, and you were just able to do it? Or was it one of these where you went to training and those kinds of things?
Well, I had teachers. Yes, I had teachers.
You did have teachers?
Yeah, I had teachers. Yes, I did.
And who was the most influential, or more importantly, what was the one thing that you learned that when you sit down at your drum kit, even on a night like the other night at Flushing Town Hall, it's what you say to yourself to prepare to do your thing?
Well, I had a cousin. He was my teacher, and I've learned quite a bit from him. And I learned quite a bit from other musicians. Uh, Coming up in Detroit, there was a lot of magnificent artists there, and I learned from a lot of them. And then being able to come to New York in 1956 and join Horace Silver in the quintet. I was with him from 56 to 59. That was a magnificent experience to be with Horace Silver and do all his writing abilities. And then after that, 59, I had the opportunity to join Cannonball Adderley Quintet. I was there from 59 to 65.
So I just listen. We could go for each step of the way, but it
Yes,
sounds like you were just surrounded with people, and almost like they say, like a child, like a sponge. You just picked up
yes.
everything. I want to show a clip. This is a drum solo you did just the other night, and I'm going to ask you a couple of things about it. So, Clyde, you ready to hear some real good jazz drumming?
Damn right, let's do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the great Louis Hayes. All right, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Louis Hayes. Do you practice every day still? Do you practice all the
It
time?
depends on what I have to do. But I have to do something very important, then I work out all the time. And then I have my times that it's just relaxing time. But I
And
do
and
still practice.
and you still do practice. What I'm always interested with all jazz players, and for example, that solo. I mean, you could have kept going, I'm sure. Do you have in your mind what you're going to do beforehand? Like, is it scripted in the way? I mean, maybe not note for note, but I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this thing, or is it more a feel thing? That you just say, okay, well, this was what makes sense to do next.
The latter part of what you said,
Latter part, wow.
that's exactly right.
Do you are you ever surprised yourself? You say, wait a minute,
Mhm.
where did that come from, kind of thing? Or at this point, I didn't want to shout about how your age, but you're in your 80s and you've been doing this a long time. Are you ever surprised? You say, wow, that was new, or is it really at this point, man, you're just mining all that stuff that you know?
Yes, it depends on the night and how I'm feeling and what the other musicians, what I get from them and the audience. So it depends on a lot of things. But I surprise myself still at this time of my life. I'm still enjoying it.
So one question about what happened the other night. So this was December 15th at Flushing Town Hall.
Yes,
I'm sure, because you mentioned Cannonball Adderley and other musicians you played with, being surrounded by the top of the game is probably about as inspiring as you can get.
yes, it's a great honor
I
to
have a
be with
question for Mr. Hayes also.
you.
Ask away, my friend.
There is another great Detroit musician, uh, NEA Jazz Master Barry Harris, a pianist. Did you ever get a chance to play with him?
We made history together.
Really?
We've made big history together since we were in Detroit. But here in
Wow.
New York, uh, he played with Cannonball Alley for a period of time also, and we recorded together. So we were great friends, and we enjoyed each other in this life of playing this music.
Wow.
Beautiful. He gave so much to Flushing Town Hall, and he played the last concert of his life at Flushing Town Hall with the NEA Jazz Masters, like you did. So I just wanted to mention that. That's all.
So let's just get back to Flushing Town Hall. How many shows jazz shows do you put out? A year, a week, a month? And then, of course, we can promote whatever's coming up. We'd be happy to do that.
Well, every year it varies, but usually there's about maybe 10 or 15 shows, maybe 20, but every year it's different. Mm-hmm. But in total, I have been there presiding or producing probably almost 450 to 500 shows.
Wow. It's just tremendous. Let's talk about audience. Do you find you get the same people? Do you find new people? Do you find they're older, they're younger?
New people. Before every concert, we ask who hasn't been here before.
Wow, very cool.
And many people raise their hands. So we find Asian people coming, African American people, people of all races and all ages, because Queens is the one place on the planet that has had more jazz icons reside there than anywhere. And with our Queens Jazz Trail map,
there you go.
It also lists all of that. It's amazing to think that John Coltrane, Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, Billie Holiday, Jimmy Heath, Chick Corea, Benny Goodman, they all live there.
They all live there. What's interesting, of course, we have Jazz Corner at Woodlawn Cemetery, and many greats are Miles Davis and Lionel Hampton. They're all buried there. So I will respect Queens for that. But I'm a partial to the Bronx, and so listen. So Louis, what's next for you? You got a gig coming up?
We're going to go into the studio latter part of next month and make another recording date.
Great. And you're just going to keep going. I mean, it's in his blood. And Clyde, the next gig over there in Flushing, do we know yet? We don't know yet.
We are working on putting a date together for the Queens Jazz Orchestra.
Oh, man.
Which is an orchestra that was created to rejuvenate and revive the music of the great masters of jazz who once resided in Queens.
Wow. Listen, guys, fantastic. It's an absolute honor to have both of you here with us.
Thank you.
The music in the Bronx is in our blood, and the more we can do, the better we can do. The fact that we have two Bronx boys here with me makes me feel really good. Clyde Ballard, thank you so much for joining us, a jazz producer at Flushing Town Hall. And listen, the great Louis Hayes, man, thank you so much. I'm going to say something really stupid. Keep going, but you don't need me to say that. But thanks, guys. Really.
Thank you very much.
It's been a total joy to have you with us.
Thank you very, very, very much.
And so that will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We will also thank our buddy Katie Honan from the city for joining us. And you know what we always say, listen, it's New Year's coming up and everything else. If the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we'll be back. Goodbye.